G'day YouTube, episode 2 of our latest series. We've been in the shop now for a good couple of weeks, finding our feet and getting everything set up. The fab room's been in full swing lately because as soon as we got our feet on the ground here, we got absolutely pummeled with new builds. In between all of that mess, I found time to get myself a new project. I figured I didn't really have too much going on, so I decided to get a nice, easy one. An XS650 without a motor that I'm going to chop and hardtail. We haven't really done anything like this before, and I think it's important to always be testing new things. Sometimes it can't come from a client build, so you got to take it on your own. Never done a hardtail before, so this is going to be a first for us. Obviously this thing's in a bit of a state of disrepair, but with the amount that we're going to use from it, it doesn't really matter. We've got set up with John-inch wheels, so our main focus today is going to be getting the wheels stripped off and those measured up to find out the hub measurements of what we need, so I'll run you through that. And then we're just going to be stripping this thing down and chopping it up, getting ready for the hardtail to go on. With our last project that I built as part of the series, the Husky, it was the plan was the whole time to keep that thing, but everyone sort of frothed on it so much we figured it'd be cool to do the giveaway, so we raffled the thing off. But this time for sure I'm keeping my bike because the last thing that I built for myself was the Sportster for Wide of the Mark, which is 2 years ago now, believe it or not, which is a bit weird to think about, but that thing was ultra sort of practical and built to go on that trip. Whereas this thing, I sort of want to focus in a little bit more on just having fun building the thing. It doesn't have to be practical, it's just going to look awesome. I want it to be really fast though, so a good part about having a bike with no engine in it is, you know, you're able to build one yourself. So I've hunted down a bunch of high performance parts for the XS650. I've got a 700cc kit. We're going to be upgrading the carbs. I've got some performance cams going in it. We'll do a bunch of porting on the head. Obviously we'll build our own custom exhaust. But the idea with this thing is just to have like a super quick, really light hardtail. What I've got Donnie doing at the moment is making a jig to hold the frame in place. So because we haven't got a gearbox to hold everything together, we're going to use the engine mounts to weld up a bit of a frame, so when we cut the rear end of the bike off, nothing moves, and that'll make sure when we come to weld the hardtail on that we'll be getting it right the first time around. One thing that I always get with old bikes is fucking seized bolts, but I always see dudes come in and they've stripped a bunch of stuff out because they sort of hit them with a bit of penetrating spray or whatever. We use Moto Easy Lube, but the heat is probably the most important thing that you can do to unseize this sort of stuff. Axles, and especially old swing arm bolts, because people just pump grease into them and they never clean them up. So the grease and dirt just sort of congeals, welds itself onto that steel, and you're never going to get the thing off. This thing is so rusty. It lived under a house in Palm Beach for like 3 years. You can totally see that. One of my favourite things to do when tearing down a bike that's been customised before is to have a look at the absolute nightmare that normally people hide within the headlight bucket. This one definitely didn't disappoint. We had cut off plugs just sitting in there, busted terminations, 40 years of people having a crack in the garage and seeing if they could figure it out.
Am I going to be talking here? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I was going to ask you how the new shop's going.
Oh, the new shop. New shop's sick. So much nicer to work in, heaps more space. Feel like I'm building fighter jets instead of muddy old sleds. No, the new shop's really good. It's making up a jig here, so once we slice it up, nothing will move at all. So just making sure I got all bases covered so it won't do any moving.
So because we're going to size up some Jonich wheels for the project, I've just had to print out our Jonich data sheet. So this is a service we offer to our clients as well. If you want to get a set of wheels but you don't know which one's going to suit, send us your old wheels and we can sort of measure them up and check for you. So I've just printed this off and we'll head down. Right. Get out of here then. So I got my rear wheel measurements. I got to leave it at that right now because we're not using the stock XS 650 front end. I got a late model Sportster front end that I'm going to use, which I'm going to run a 21-inch wheel on and a Mullins chain drive set of super narrow triple trees. So I got to wait till I get the triple trees or the boys there give me the measurements I need for the hub, and then I can send them off to Jonich and see what they can do for me. I think Donnie's just about done with this motor jig, so the bike's stripped. I guess it's time that we pull the front end off, get rid of the swing arm, and we can start chopping into this thing. So day 2 on the XS 650 chop build. Last work day, we got the bike stripped, frame chopped, and we got the jig built. So we're just setting up the jig on our welding table now to start getting it all straightened out and measured up. So I'll take you in and show you just what we're thinking about doing with this thing. Dylan welded up the neck post. Got that set up at a 27-degree rake, which is keeping the stock XS rake angle. It was sort of like what I was going to go for anyway. I checked what it was stock, and that was, you know, the stock angle on an XS. So we got that set up. We've got to get this frame set center on the table, and then the rear wheel post. We've shortened up the wheelbase by 100 mil. So these things normally run 1430 from axle to axle. We're running 1340 now. So we've shortened it up a bit. It just looks a bit nicer. There's no need to have like a really long chop. I'm a short bloke. It's my bike, so I'm gonna build it how I fucking want. And then once we get that, I've sort of mapped out our, you know, like a sort of mud map on the hardtail, just with some alley filler rod to get a bit of an idea on how it's gonna look. And then also thrown like the dummy rear wheel in there just to make sure it's gonna look right. So we'll set this up, and then I've made my slugs up, and hopefully today we can start bending and welding. So not having done a hardtail before, I sort of went through after we'd finished our last work day and just worked out a bunch of our measurements and stuff that we're going to be using on the bike, because in the absence of actually having the parts here, like the wheels and stuff, we got to do it by tape measure and ruler. So I've got the front wheel that we're going to be using a 20 with a 90/90 tyre on it. So the diameter of the tyre, and divided that to get our front axle height, and then doing the same for our rear axle height with the jigs being set up, and then we can set our distance off the table. I've got to jump on the lathe now and make our rear axle slider slugs for the chromoly to weld onto. But once we've done that, we should have nearly everything that we need to just run this thing and make it. The best thing about a mobile tube bender is they're really easy to move. way does this thing normally go? Does this face? Yeah, so the idea was to come through that up. So on the hardtail, I've just set up our Speedworks bender. I got a new bender in last week, sort of in preparation for this job. I used to have the JD Squared version. It's pretty well the same thing. Speedworks are an Aussie company. It's sort of like improved on that design a little bit. It's got a few extra bits and pieces that make it a bit more accurate when you're bending, I guess. So we're going to be using a 19mm chromoly tube, 2mm wall. So the 4130 tubing is a lot stronger than your standard mild steel, so it'll enable us to have like a nice thin frame on the rear of the hardtail, but it'll still be super, super strong. So Donnie's just setting up in the fab room to get the sort of engine cradle finished up, and then on the rear of the frame, once we've got that set out, we'll start using our 19mm tube. So the slugs that we've built are like a little step down that we can weld on there, make sure we get a nice strong join. So I'm going to jump on the lathe, make a few more slugs, and you can probably jump in the fab room and check out what Donnie's doing.
Donnie, back in the fab lab. What I'm working on, just doing the bottom carriage of the hardtail here. Just getting everything measured up, making sure everything's true before I go ahead and start welding. Just doing this bottom tube here. There's a spigot for the bottom tube. We've got a nice big prep on it for welding, so we can get full penetration. That's all I'm fucking doing, right? So I've just got done with this cross member here and this little spigot coming down from the down tube, and these spigots here that are going to finish the rest of the hardtail. We're dropping this down to 19mm, but got everything tacked up here, plenty of tacks, so nothing moves. But if something changes, we can cut them and fix it, make it work.
We've got our stuff mocked up, ready to start bending these tubes. What I normally do with any of this sort of stuff is we just use a bit of alley filler rod to sort of map out, make sure we get it looking right, and then we'll take that filler rod and make a sketch on our table. So Dylan's just measuring up now. I'll measure the angles that we've got on the tube from like the side view of our hardtail, and then from the top here, we'll work out our sort of seat section and getting between the backbone of the bike and the spread on the axle plates, how to sort of like make 225 meet up with our, I think it's a 45mm backbone. So we'll sketch out on the table, make our axle width and then our tyre width, where that ends up, so we can make it all look right from the top. I think it's probably going to be easier to visualise on the table than it is to muck around with pieces of wire on the bike. So from side on, we've got these to set up, and then from the top, we'll make sure that we get it right on the table. So just wrapping up a massive day in the shop. The SWS welder has been earning its money, working overtime. So have I today. We got the hardtail done. She's tacked up and started to get welded. I guess we're at the point now we can probably unbolt it off the jig and she'd be sweet. We went with a bit of a weird styled hardtail. On XS 650s, I always see these things hardtailed, but they're always a bit too long to my eye. So we've shortened the wheelbase, like I said before, and done this nice sort of like offset sweeping curve, bringing the backbone down a little bit sharper and then putting a 15-degree bend on there to meet up with the axle plate. From here, I think I'll probably gusset the inside of this to tidy that old axle plate up a bit. Might do something on top here just to sort of like sort that line out as well. Further than that, I've just got to start to unbolt this thing, flip it so we can get all the plug welds underneath and then start to finish weld it. All right, so we're powering ahead with that XS build. It's now day 3 of that project. So we're doing this a Wednesday apart. Donnie's gonna be pretty much locked in that fab room finishing up the welding all day, so there's not really much two of us can do. So I'm gonna be working on this thing. We've got a wide wheel kit on a 2020 Indian bobber. We just got the wheels back, tires fitted up. I had to cut and radius this fender. It was supposed to fit, but it didn't. So I've done that yesterday. It's pretty close. I've just got a little bit more radiusing to do to make sure it fits nice and snug on this tire. But let's go into the fab room and we'll run you through what's going down on the chopper build today. So where I left last time, we had the hardtail pretty well mocked up. We're starting to get the bracing done and in. So on the the job list today is just finishing off the hardtail weld, and then we're going to start modifying the front of the frame so we can fit a tank up better and start to tidy all these old engine mounts and stuff up, make it look really smooth. So it's been a while since we've been able to get a bit of work done on this series. COVID's really kicked us in the arse the last few months in Australia, been dealing with a lot of lockdowns. So now that we're coming out of it, got a couple of bikes done, we were able to focus in and knock out a few projects. What I'm doing this afternoon is we're going to run a reveal event. So instead of putting it out on pipe burn or bike XF like we normally would, these bikes are going to be viewed first in the metal. So I'm going to clean these things up. We're running a party with our mates Burleigh Brewing at the tap house down the road, the new neighbours of ours. These things are getting cleaned up and then we'll run you through the event this Savo and have everyone come in, see the bikes, have a few beers. It's a Friday afternoon and should be a pretty good event. Generally, this is the part where your favourite YouTuber is going to ask you to subscribe to their Patreon. Luckily for you, we're not YouTubers. We're bike builders and parts makers. So if you like the content we create and the bikes we build, or you hate both of those things and just want to grab some gear for your next project, make sure you show your support, jump on our online store and give your bike that purpose-built Moto touch. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.